Hello everybody, welcome to our channel Full Stack Developer, the channel that will boost your productivity as a full stack developer. In this video, we are going to see how to initialize a containerized SQL database with Docker. But before we start, I'm going to explain why we need a Dockerized database. Let's assume that you are working on a project with a front end, a back end, and a remote database. Till here, everything works great. You develop your feature, you push your code, and you are done. But in a real-world project, you may find yourself working with other developers in the same project, and all of them are testing their development in the same remote database. This can be problematic because of changes that can break the database or testing with some data or connected users. Remote database can also be problematic because it's not versioned and cannot be applied in automated tests. So the solution is very simple. Every developer should load a local database on its machine, and the model of the database can be shared with a versioning tool like Git, for example. Following this approach, the database can be versioned and no conflicts can occur when testing. But what if you have not the same operating system? How we ensure that the changes works on the remote database? The solution for this problem is containerization. So each developer load in its own machine an image of this database with its shared configuration using Docker. Now that every developer has the image of the database loaded in a container locally, we have to figure out how to initialize this database with its model and maybe dummy data for testing as well. The dummy data are very important for testing. For example, we can set the users that can have access to our application. We may also add items related to these users to test the relationship. Also, we can set permissions of the database of restricted access to some features. And finally, other dummy data just to fill the database. With Docker, we can set this data with Docker entry point, and this is what we are going to see together in practice. So to summarize, we have a Docker image containing a SQL database, and in order for us to initialize the database, we have to use a Docker volume to persist the data. Volumes are preferred mechanism for persisting data generated by and used by Docker containers. In our example, I'm going to use a Postgres database admin to see the output and a volume to persist the data. Finally, I have to create a bridge between Postgres image and Postgres admin image so that they can communicate with each other, and I will launch all of this with Docker Compose. So let's see the selection. Here I am on VS Code and I have created a folder called dummy database. In this folder, I'm going to create a file called Docker Compose. I have created the Docker Compose file so that I can launch two services. The first service is a database Postgres Docker container, and the second one is Postgres admin. So I'm gonna copy and paste some code. Here I've created my services. So the first service is the database. So here, as you see, I'm going to call the container image. Let's call it dummy database container. Here we create the variable environments. We set the name of the database, the user, and the password. Of course, the password in a real-world example has to be encrypted. And here's the most important part, is that I'm going to map a folder in my local folder here to the folder entry point that will execute automatically SQL scripts. So I'm going to create a folder here called database, and in this database I'm going to create an SQL file, and on it I'm going to add some SQL scripts. And I have added a network also, so that my database can communicate with Postgres admin. I'm going to add Postgres admin in the second service here. So as you see here, the container name is Postgres admin database container. Here we add also a network to communicate with the database that was created here, and here are some environment variables that are important to initialize Postgres admin. In this third part, I'm going to create a network. So I'm gonna add a network here, and in networks I have to add a driver called bridge. So the bridge will be the communicating port with a database and Postgres admin. And finally, I have to create some volumes. So the volumes will be used with Postgres admin and the database, so the data can be persisted. Now let's pass to the second part, which is creating SQL script. So let's create a table here called, for example, public user. I'm gonna add an ID, first name should be text type, last name also would be text type, and a country with the same type. I'm gonna add a constraint to say that the ID will be unique here. Let's now say that the table space will be Postgres default, and then I'm going to insert some dummy data in this table. Now that we have added some data, I'm going to execute all of this with a command called docker compose app. So let's create a terminal here, and I'm going to call docker compose app. So here, as you see, a database was created and a table also was created with 3 inserts. Let's now open a web browser, and then let's go to the port 5050. We are here in a Postgres admin. I'm going to add the database, the password, which is Postgres by default, and here I'm gonna add some server to my Postgres admin. Here I'm going to call it dummy database, and in the connection I'm going to use this port because I have already used it in my configuration. The host name would be by default DB in a local machine, and the password will be Postgres by default. So I'm going to save, and yes, as you see, I have access to my database. My database will be called example DB, and if we look to the tables here, we see that we have a table called user that we already created in the script, and if we show all the rows for this table, as you can see here, we see our data that we initialized together in the script. So this way, all other developers that can use our container database will use the same dummy data, the same fixtures, so that they can test their code. So I hope that you liked this video. Don't forget to subscribe, and see you on the next videos. Ciao.